Today I wanted to talk about some basic gray diagrams. Gray diagrams are essentially arrows, links, and points connected to each other such that you describe some structure with the way that those objects relate to each other. So right here so what I like to do is I just start with some words and I start with some diagrams, and then I just try to describe it in words as if it were an English word. So right here, for instance, we have an arrow going in one direction and an arrow going in another direction from a point. I'm calling that diverging. Over here, I have one arrow from a point to a point. I'm calling that transforming. And if two things are equivalent, I figure that it would be maybe 2 points connected by an arrow to show that there is some way to get back and forth, because essentially I consider a straight line to be an arrow in both directions. So this is also an arrow in both directions, which you can see I tried to draw in really bright green. So there it is with blue arrowheads now. It's better. And then I have identity, which I believe in category theory, or in the terms of diagrams, is an arrow pointing back at itself. So I counted that as the identity. But gray diagrams can get even more complicated if we allow things like containers or circles. Here's some more complicated gray diagrams. So this one maps the interior and the exterior. This maps to some exterior to an interior, and this maps interiors right here. And finally, we have something that is more of an artistic interpretation of what a black hole would look like in gray language. So you can enter, information can enter, but upon information's attempt to exit, it is hit with an arrow that pushes it back towards the perimeter. So then what we can do is we can use use parallel universe. You see a parallel universe starts from a point, it branches, and then it continues along some time series iterations. And for these parallel universes, I put an arrow. God damn it. For these parallel universes, I put a link to indicate that there is some operation that can get from here to here and here to here. In other words, you can move between the parallel universes. Then, if you want to construct a black hole in a universe, what you have to do is you have to take one of the ends where it's a terminating part of the universe and connect to it a black hole. So gray language kind of combines different structures in that way. So I encourage you all to try to make your own gray diagrams, because they're kind of fun. And I will also post this on my Tumblr. So, yeah. Next, a similar note on the subject. Today I wanted to talk about gray diagrams. Gray diagrams as in gray alien. Gray diagrams are combinations of points, lines, connectors, and circles, generally. We combine these different symbols to form words. So, for instance, I consider this the word equivalent. So here I have some example gray diagrams from when I was just playing around with them. I call this one emergent. This is essentially a triangle. I don't know why. I just can't figure it out. So here I have equivalent, I have transforming, and I have one I call the identity, which is an arrow from a point to itself. I wanted to talk about this one. This is transforming to an equivalence class. So it has an arrow that goes to some point. So there's some transformation between this point alpha sub 1 and this point alpha sub 2. There is also another transformation to a point alpha sub 3. But that transformation is, but between A2 and A3, there is a link, essentially a transformation from A3 to A2 and from A2 back to A3. So I call this transforming into an equivalent class. There is also another equivalent. That equivalent is from alpha to B1, beta 1, and from alpha to beta 2. So I say here that we can get from B1 to B2. B1 is resonant with B via some alpha, via alpha. I call this, if this were a word translated into English from gray alien language, it would be, this would be equivalent. Oh no, this would be cyclical. I think if there were a word for this symbol in gray alien, I would call it cyclical, because it looks like it cycles back and forth. It can also mean different things, and that's the fun of the language, is that this could mean cyclical, or this could mean equivalent, because this could also be, we could have that this was equivalent with this. In other words, a link is the same as an arrow going one direction and an arrow coming back. I also want to talk about some of the basic strange words in gray alien. Like this one, it's a container with an arrow that points to some object within the container. So it is signifying that it's part of some larger space. Or we could have this mapping points between two spaces. But we could also have just an arrow points to a space, which signifies that this is some kind of container. And this points to something that has an underlying structure. So one last thing is, I want to encourage you to look into these basic gray diagrams. These are the most basic operations that I feel like would be in the gray alien language. And please try to create your own gray diagrams. And so what I like to do, once again, is I just like to come up with a symbol and then try to give it some word in English, just to give it something to hold on to, some structure. So I encourage you to do that. Just draw some diagrams and try to add words that would be translations for those diagrams. Have a good day.